My name is Linda Hamilton, and 6 years ago, my mother called me a disgrace to our family in front of 16 relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. She based it on a lie my brother told, a lie so perfectly crafted, so surgically designed to destroy me that my own father couldn't look me in the eyes while she said it. Last Tuesday, that same brother was arrested for killing a man with his car. And I'm the only person in this county who can prove he didn't do it. Let me set the scene for you. I'm sitting in my office at the Hartford County District Attorney's Building, third floor, corner office with a view of the courthouse steps I've walked up over 400 times. It's 8:47 in the morning. My coffee is still hot. The case files from yesterday's arraignments are stacked neatly on my desk, color-coded by priority. Everything in order, everything under control. Then my paralegal, Dennis, knocks twice and walks in without waiting. His face is the color of old milk. His hands are shaking slightly, something I've never seen in 4 years of working together. He sets a tablet on my desk, the county detention intake log from the previous night. I scan it the way I always do, checking for names I recognize, cases that might cross my desk, patterns that might indicate something bigger. And then I see it. Bradley Gerald Whitmore. Date of birth, March 3, 1989. Charges, vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Bail status, denied. Bond hearing scheduled for Thursday. The photo next to the name is my brother. Bloodshot eyes, 3-day stubble, the orange jumpsuit washing out whatever color was left in his face. There's a cut above his left eyebrow, butterfly stitched, probably from the airbag. He looks exactly like what he is, a man whose entire life just collapsed. I stared at that photo for 11 seconds. I counted. 11 seconds to process 6 years of silence, 16 unanswered calls, 2 returned letters, 1 Thanksgiving that shattered everything I thought I knew about family, and now this, my brother in county lockup, facing 25 years. Dennis cleared his throat. "You okay, boss?" I looked up. My voice came out steady, professional, the same voice I use in court when a witness says something that changes everything. "I'm fine. Pull the arrest report, the witness statements, and the traffic camera footage request. I want it on my desk by noon." He nodded and left. He didn't ask why. That's why I hired him. Before I continue, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where my story is traveling today. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, the one blamed for everything while someone else got away with it, type me below. And subscribe to the channel if stories like this speak to you. Now, let me take you back to a Thanksgiving dinner in Hartford, Connecticut, and the last time I ever sat at my mother's table. Growing up, there were 2 children in the Whitmore house, but only one who mattered. My brother Bradley, Brad to everyone who loved him, which was everyone, came out of the womb performing. Captain of the football team, homecoming king, the kid who could talk to any adult at any dinner party and make them feel like the most interesting person in the room. He had this way of tilting his head when you spoke, like every word you said was fascinating, like he was really listening. People loved that about him. They didn't realize he was just cataloging information, storing ammunition for later. My parents, Gerald and Diane Whitmore, Hartford born and raised, upper middle class strivers with a 3-bedroom colonial and a reputation to protect, adored him for it. In their eyes, Brad could do no wrong, and I mean that literally. The boy was incapable of failure in their minds, even when he failed constantly. Dad managed regional operations for a manufacturing company, a job that kept him on the road 3 days a week and gave him an excuse to avoid anything emotionally complicated at home. Mom did volunteer work at St. Michael's Church and sat on 2 community boards, positions that required her to maintain a certain image. They valued 3 things above all else: appearances, loyalty, and sons. I was the quiet one, the girl with her nose in a book while Brad held court at the dinner table. I wasn't rebellious, I wasn't difficult, I was simply invisible. There's a difference between being forgotten and never being seen in the first place. I learned that difference before I turned 10. Here's a small example. Sophomore year, I made the National Honor Society, top 3% of my class, a 97.4 GPA, a ceremony in the school auditorium with a reception afterward. I'd worked for that honor for 2 years. Same night, Brad had an away game in New Haven. Varsity football, nothing special, just a regular season game against a team we'd already beaten twice. One guess where my parents went. I took the bus to the ceremony. I sat in the front row with the other honorees, looking at the empty seats I'd reserved in the back. When I crossed the stage to receive my certificate, I looked out at the audience and saw other parents crying, taking photos, mouthing the words, "We're so proud of you." My seat stayed empty the entire night. When I came home with my certificate, Dad glanced at it over his newspaper and said, "That's nice, Linda." He didn't ask what my GPA was. He didn't ask what classes I was taking. He never did. I told myself it didn't hurt. I told myself I didn't need the attention. I poured everything into my grades, my AP classes, my LSAT prep. I figured if I couldn't be the daughter they noticed, I'd be the daughter they couldn't ignore. And for one brief, shining moment, I was. The day I got accepted to Columbia Law School, one of the top 5 law programs in the country, something shifted. I'd taken the LSAT twice. First time, top 12%, a 164. Good enough for most schools, not good enough for me. I took it again, studied 14 hours a day for 3 months, survived on coffee and determination, and scored in the top 5% nationally, 174 out of 180. That score put me in the same category as future Supreme Court clerks. Brad had taken the LSAT the year before. He scored 149. Bottom third. He told our parents the test was rigged, that it didn't measure real intelligence, that law school was overrated anyway. He never took it again. He went to work for Dad's company instead, a job that materialized out of nowhere despite Brad having no relevant qualifications. The day my Columbia acceptance letter arrived, I handed it to my father at the kitchen table. He read it slowly. His eyebrows went up. I watched his face change, watched something like recognition flicker behind his eyes. "Columbia," he said, like he was tasting the word. "That's a real law school." "Yes." "Full scholarship?" "Partial. 42,000 a year covered. I'll need loans for the rest." He nodded, set the letter down, and looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in my life, my father saw me as something other than background noise. "Maybe you'll make something of yourself after all, Linda." It wasn't a compliment, not really, but it was the closest thing to one I'd ever gotten from him, and I held onto it like oxygen. But that wasn't even the worst part, because what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Brad was watching from the living room doorway. I caught his expression for just a second before he rearranged his face into something neutral. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was calculation, assessment, planning. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. They had no idea I'd spent years building a case file on my own family. Let me tell you who I am now, because the girl who left for Columbia and the woman sitting in that prosecutor's office are two very different people. I'm the assistant district attorney for Hartford County. 4 years on the job, 94% conviction rate, the highest in the department. They call me the receipt queen in the courthouse, not because I'm organized, because I never, ever go to trial without proof so airtight that defense attorneys have started pleading out just to avoid facing me in front of a jury. I've put away 3 city councilmen for corruption, a police captain for evidence tampering, and the heir to a pharmaceutical fortune who thought his last name meant the rules didn't apply to him. I don't do favors, I don't bend, and I absolutely don't lose. My office has a framed quote on the wall, something Katie Chen told me my first week on the job. The truth doesn't need a loud voice, it just needs receipts. Nobody at work knows about my family. Nobody knows that Linda Hamilton is actually Linda Whitmore, daughter of Gerald and Diane, sister of Bradley. I took my husband's name the day we got married, and I never looked back. My colleagues think I'm an only child. Some assume I'm estranged from my parents for normal reasons, career differences, political disagreements, the usual family friction. They have no idea. In my desk drawer, locked with the key I keep on my person at all times, there's a folder I've kept for 6 years. Inside, my law school transcript, proving I never took a single class with Professor Daniel Hartwell. A signed letter from the Dean of Students confirming my academic standing was impeccable throughout my 3 years at Columbia. Screenshots of every text message my brother sent me in the months before he destroyed my life. A copy of the certified letter I sent my parents with documentation proving my innocence, returned unopened with my mother's handwriting on the envelope. And 2 handwritten letters from my father that I've never shown anyone. I kept it all. Every receipt. Every piece of evidence. I'm a prosecutor. It's what I do. I just never thought I'd need to use it to save the person who tried to destroy me. The pattern was set before I was old enough to name it. Brad's 16th birthday, a surprise party at the Hartford Country Club, 40 guests, a DJ who'd driven up from New York, a 3-tier cake shaped like football with his jersey number and blue frosting. I helped Mom address the invitations. I blew up balloons for 3 hours. Total costs, I found out later when I saw the credit card statement on Mom's desk, $4,200. My 16th birthday, dinner at Olive Garden, 4 people. Me, Mom, Dad, and Brad, who spent the entire meal texting his girlfriend and left before dessert. Mom spent most of dinner talking about Brad's upcoming college applications, which schools were looking at him for football, which recruiters had called. My cake was from the grocery store bakery. It said Happy Birthday Laura because they'd run out of the right letters. That's not even the worst part. Brad failed calculus junior year. Not just failed, he got a 34 on the final exam. My parents hired a private tutor, a PhD candidate from Yale, who charged $300 a week, 4 months of sessions, nearly $5,000 total. They told him it was an investment in his future. I got a 98 in AP chemistry the same semester, the highest grade in the class. My teacher wrote a personal note on my report card saying I had the most promising scientific mind she'd seen in 20 years of teaching. At dinner, when I mentioned I was thinking about pre-med, maybe combining it with law for healthcare policy, Mom said, "That's nice, honey." Then she turned to Brad and asked about his homecoming date. I sat at that table holding my report card under the table, and I felt something shift inside me. Not break, shift. I realized, maybe for the first time, that nothing I did would ever be enough. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because in their eyes, the competition was already over. Brad had won the day he was born male. Senior year, I was accepted to Columbia with a partial scholarship, $42,000 a year, covered. I'd applied in secret, paid the $50 application fee with babysitting money, and written my personal statement about growing up invisible in a house that only had room for 1 star. The night I told my parents, Brad was home from his first semester at UConn. He'd already switched majors twice and was on academic probation for attendance issues. But we weren't talking about that. We never talked about Brad's failures. "Columbia," Mom said, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "That's in New York." "Yes, it's far. It's 3 hours by train. I can come home on weekends if you want." She looked at Dad. He looked at Brad. Brad smiled, the kind of smile that only reaches the mouth. "That's great, Linda. Really proud of you." He wasn't proud. He was already planning. I just didn't know it yet. Second year of law school, October. Leaves turning orange and red across the Columbia campus, the air crisp with possibility. My grades in the top 15% of my class. I was on law review, had a summer associate position lined up at a mid-sized firm in Midtown, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that belonged entirely to me. Brad called to say he was coming to visit. "Just for a weekend," he said. "Want to see the big city, check out your fancy school? Maybe you can show me around, introduce me to your friends." I was so desperate for connection, so starved for any sign that my family saw me, that I said yes without hesitation. I cleaned my apartment for 3 hours. I made a list of restaurants I thought he'd like. I was embarrassingly excited. He arrived on a Friday afternoon. I showed him my apartment, my favorite coffee shop on Amsterdam Avenue, the library where I studied until midnight surrounded by future lawyers and judges. I introduced him to my study group, to Ashley, who thought he was charming, to Marcus, who invited him to a party that night. I let him into my world. I gave him the tour of everything I'd built. He asked questions, lots of them, about my professors, my schedule, my classmates, my routine, which buildings I used, which coffee shops, which routes I walked. He remembered every name, every detail. He even took notes on his phone, which I thought was sweet. I thought he was finally interested in my life. What happened next still gives me chills. 2 weeks after his visit, I called home for Mom's birthday. She didn't answer. I tried Dad, voicemail. I tried 3 more times over the next 2 days. Nothing. Radio silence. Then Brad called. His voice was syrup, thick with false concern. "Linda, I'm so sorry. I had to tell them. I couldn't keep protecting you anymore." "Tell them what?" "About you and Professor Hartwell." The floor dropped out from under me. I was standing in my apartment kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and the room started spinning. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. "What are you talking about?" He sighed, the performative sigh of someone who's rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. I saw the way he looked at you when we walked past his office, the way he said your name, and then Ashley told me you've been spending extra time with him after class, office hours that go long, private meetings. Brad, I've never even met Professor Hartwell. I didn't take constitutional law with him. I took it with Professor Morrison. It's on my transcript. You can verify it in 30 seconds. That's not what Ashley said. Ashley, a girl I'd introduced him to for exactly 4 minutes, a girl who, I'd later learn, he'd taken to dinner the night after I left them alone at the party, a girl who had a crush on him and would have said anything to impress the charming older brother with the football stories and the easy smile. Brad, this is insane. Daniel Hartwell is 54 years old. He's married. He has 3 children. He's been at Columbia for 22 years with a spotless record. I know, Brad said. And that's what makes it so sad, Linda. But Mom and Dad needed to know the truth. I was protecting you, protecting the family, protecting me. The phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds. He continued, his voice so calm it was almost soothing. I showed them the messages, Linda. What messages? From your phone. When you were in the shower on Saturday morning, I looked through it. I saw the text between you and him, the way you talked to each other. It's all there. I had never sent a single message to Daniel Hartwell. I didn't know his number. I didn't know what he looked like. I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. And Brad knew that. He knew it because there was nothing to find, which meant he'd made it up, fabricated screenshots, created evidence out of thin air to destroy my reputation. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this? And then he said something I'll never forget, something that revealed exactly who my brother had always been. Because you were going to be everything I never was. Top law school, big career, the one they'd brag about at parties. And I couldn't let that happen, Linda. I just couldn't. He said it so calmly, like he was explaining why he'd returned a defective sweater, like destroying my life was just a practical decision he'd made. I'll never forget what he said next. Good luck explaining this to Mom and Dad. They already changed the locks. And by the way, don't bother calling. They've blocked your number. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen for 45 minutes, phone still in my hand, watching the sun set through my window. I didn't cry. I was too stunned to cry. I just stood there, processing the fact that my brother had just executed a perfect strike against me, and he'd done it with a smile. 3 weeks later, I drove to Hartford for Thanksgiving anyway. I wasn't invited, but I went. I had my transcript in my bag, printed and highlighted, showing every class I'd taken and every professor I'd had. I had the dean's office number saved in my phone. I had 3 character references from professors who could confirm I'd never so much as spoken to Daniel Hartwell. I thought evidence would matter. I thought truth would matter. I was so naive. The house was full when I arrived. 16 relatives, including Aunt Ruth from Boston, Uncle Pete and his wife from New Jersey, 2 sets of cousins, and my grandmother, Nana June, 83 years old, and the antriac of the entire family. Brad was already holding court by the fireplace, drink in hand, telling some story that had everyone laughing. He saw me walk in. His smile didn't falter for even a second. Mom was in the kitchen, basting the turkey. She barely looked at me. Her shoulders stiffened the moment she heard my voice. "Mom," I started, "can we talk? Just for 5 minutes? I have documentation that proves—" She held up her hand, still holding the basting brush. "Not here, not now. You'll upset your grandmother." "Then when? When can we talk about this?" She turned back to the stove. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Linda. Brad told us everything." "They're not excuses. They're facts. I can prove everything I'm saying if you'll just look at—" And then the kitchen went quiet. The sounds of the living room faded. I turned around. Dad was standing in the doorway, his face hard as stone. Behind him, Brad. Behind them, slowly gathering, everyone else. Aunt Ruth, Uncle Pete, cousins, Nana June in her wheelchair being pushed by my cousin Michael. Mom walked past me into the dining room. She stood at the head of the table, hands shaking, voice loud enough for every person in that house to hear. "I have something to say before we eat." I felt 16 relatives turn to look at her, then at me. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. My daughter, Mom said, and her voice cracked with something that sounded almost like grief, has brought shame on this family. She has been involved with a married professor at her law school, a man old enough to be her father, a man with a wife and 3 children. Someone gasped. I think it was Aunt Ruth. I tried to speak. Mom, that's not... She kept going, her voice rising. Brad did the right thing by telling us. He was protecting her, protecting all of us, and I will not have this kind of behavior in my house. I will not have this disgrace at my table. Nana June's face went pale. Her hands, folded in her lap, started trembling. Uncle Pete looked at the floor. Aunt Ruth covered her mouth with both hands. I pulled the transcript from my bag. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled like a leaf in wind. Look at this, I said. Please, just look at this. This is my official transcript from Columbia Law School. I never took a single class with Professor Daniel Hartwell. Not one, not ever. I took constitutional law with Professor Morrison. It's right here in black and white. Brad made this up. Every word of it is a lie. Mom walked toward me. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. She took the paper from my hands. I watched her eyes move across the page. I watched her read it. I watched her understand. And then she ripped it in half, right down the middle, in front of everyone, without a word. She dropped the pieces on the floor and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. I would rather have no daughter, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, than have a daughter who brings this kind of disgrace into our home. Silence. Total, devastating silence. I looked at Brad. He was standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, watching like this was entertainment. There was no guilt on his face, no hesitation, just the faint trace of a smile at the corner of his mouth. I looked at Dad. He was staring at his shoes. His jaw was clenched. His hands were fists at his sides. Dad, I said, please, you know me. You've known me my whole life. Look at me. He didn't look up. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, frozen, choosing silence over his daughter. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being something else entirely. I drove back to New York that night, 4 hours on I-95, tears freezing on my face, the heat in my car broken because I couldn't afford to fix it, the radio playing songs I couldn't hear over the sound of my own heartbeat. I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove straight to the Columbia campus, parked in a lot I couldn't afford, and walked to the law building. It was 9 o'clock on Thanksgiving night. The halls were empty. Everyone was home with their families. Everyone except Professor Katie Chen. She was 60 years old, the first Asian American woman to serve as district attorney in New York County, now teaching criminal law at Columbia as a semi-retirement project. She was 5'2", built like a steel cable wrapped in a cardigan, and she had a reputation for destroying overconfident defense attorneys so thoroughly that some of them had retired early just to avoid facing her again. I'd taken her class first semester of my first year. She'd handed back my first exam with a single note in the margin. See me after class. I'd gone to her office, terrified I'd failed. Instead, she'd looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "You argue like someone who's been fighting her whole life. Have you ever considered prosecution?" That was the beginning of everything. When I knocked on her office door that Thanksgiving night, mascara streaked down my face, transcript torn in my pocket, shaking from cold and grief, she didn't ask what happened. She just opened the door wider and said, "There's tea in the pot. Come in." I told her everything. The lie, the transcript, my mother's face, my father's silence, my brother's smile, the sound of the paper ripping, the drive home in the dark. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she poured me another cup of tea, sat back in her chair, and said something I've never forgotten. The people who were supposed to protect you failed. That's not your fault. That's their failure, and they'll have to live with it. But what you do now, that's your choice. You can let this break you, or you can let it build you. I know which one I'd choose. I graduated third in my class. Katie Chen gave the commencement speech. When I crossed the stage to get my diploma, she shook my hand and whispered, "Now go put some liars in prison." No one from Hartford came, not to graduation, not to the bar exam results party, not to my swearing-in ceremony at the DA's office, but other people came. I met Harry at a courthouse coffee cart 3 weeks into my first year as an ADA. He was a civil rights attorney, calm brown eyes, dry humor, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. Our first conversation lasted 45 minutes. Our second date over Thai food in the village, he told me he wanted to meet my family. So I told him the truth. All of it. Every detail. The favoritism, the lie, the Thanksgiving, the silence. I told him about the letters I'd sent that came back unopened, about the phone calls that went straight to voicemail, about the brother who destroyed me because he couldn't stand the thought of me succeeding. He didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't suggest calling my parents to work things out or give it time or be the bigger person. He just reached across the table, took my hand, and said 5 words I'll never forget. You deserve better than them. And then he said 5 more, and now you have me. We got married on a Saturday afternoon in October, 18 months later. His parents' backyard in Connecticut, 30 guests, string lights in the trees. His father, Harold, walked me down the aisle because mine wasn't there. His mother, Eleanor, cried through the whole ceremony. She'd already started calling me her daughter. Harold and Eleanor became the parents I never had. Harold, a retired high school principal, called me his daughter the first time I came to dinner, before Harry and I were even engaged. Eleanor, a former nurse, taught me to make her grandmother's apple pie and cried when I got it right. They asked about my work, remembered my cases, showed up to every important moment. For the first time in 30 years, I understood what family was supposed to feel like. And I knew I'd never go back. After the Thanksgiving that ended everything, I tried to reach my parents 11 times, 4 phone calls in the first week, all sent to voicemail. By the 5th call, the number was blocked. 3 emails over the next month, long, detailed with attachments, my transcript, the dean's letter, character references, all ignored, no response. 2 letters, handwritten, sent certified mail, both returned unopened with my mother's handwriting on the envelope, returned to sender. 1 message through Aunt Ruth, the only family member who still spoke to me. She called me back the next day, crying. Your father told me to stay out of it, she said. He said I had to choose, the family or you. She chose me. She's the only one who did. And 1 final attempt, a legal package sent to my parents' home address via certified courier. Inside, my complete transcripts, the dean's official letter, 3 professor testimonials, and a cover letter from me, 8 pages long, laying out every piece of evidence proving my innocence. It came back 3 days later, marked refused, signature on the return, Gerald Whitmore, my father's handwriting. That was when I stopped trying. They thought my silence meant I'd given up. They had no idea it meant I was done. Over the next 6 years, I built a life they knew nothing about. I changed my name when I married Harry. I moved twice, finally settling in a house with a porch that got good morning light and a backyard where our golden retriever, Objection, could run. I stopped following anyone from Hartford on social media. I deleted Facebook entirely. And they got comfortable in their version of events. Brad posted family photos every holiday. Best Thanksgiving with my real family, read one caption, 3 years after he destroyed mine. Blessed to have parents who always supported me, read another. He posted photos of himself with mom and dad at Christmas, at Easter, at summer barbecues, smiling, happy, complete. I saw them only because Aunt Ruth, who never believed the lie, sent them to me. Keep these, she said. Evidence, just in case you ever need it. I saved every single one. Mom told relatives I'd cut them off, that I was the one who refused to reconcile, that I'd chosen my career over family, that I was too proud to apologize. She told Nana June I wouldn't even take her calls. Nana June was 87 by then, too old and too tired to question it. She died 2 years later, alone, in a nursing home in West Hartford, believing her granddaughter had abandoned her. I didn't find out about the funeral until 2 weeks after it happened. No one called me, no one sent a card. No one told me my grandmother had died. I learned about it from a Google alert I'd set up years before, just to keep track of anything published about my family. The Hartford Current obituary, 7 paragraphs, listing Nana June's survivors: Gerald, Diane, Bradley and his wife Megan, and their daughter Emma, age 4. Brad had gotten married. Brad had a daughter, a niece I'd never met, a little girl with my blood in her veins who would grow up not knowing I existed. That night, I sat in my kitchen with Harry until 3 in the morning and cried for everything I'd lost. And then, 3 years after they cut me off, I got a phone call that changed everything. The State Bar Association. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint against me, claiming I'd fabricated my academic credentials, claiming I'd been involved in an ethics scandal at Columbia, claiming my bar admission should be reviewed and possibly revoked. The bar investigated. Of course they did. They have to investigate every complaint. It took 4 months. They interviewed my professors, reviewed my transcript, examined every case I'd ever tried. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. But they traced the complaint. Anonymous complaints still leave digital footprints. The IP address came from Hartford, Connecticut, from my parents' home address. Brad was still hunting me, still trying to destroy what I'd built, even after he'd won, even after he'd taken everything. I showed Harry the trace report that night. He stared at it for a long time, his jaw tightening. "That's not sibling rivalry," he said finally. "That's something else entirely." He was right. This wasn't about competition anymore. This was about control, about making sure I never rose high enough to threaten the story they told themselves, about keeping me down forever. Little did they know, I was already 3 steps ahead. 2 years after the Thanksgiving that ended everything, a letter arrived at my apartment in New York. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in familiar script. My father's handwriting. I opened it, standing in the hallway, still in my coat from work. Inside, 3 pages of yellow legal paper covered in his careful accountant's script. "Linda, I know you won't believe me. I wouldn't believe me either, but I need you to know something, even if it doesn't change anything. I know you didn't do what Brad said. I've always known. From the moment he told us, something felt wrong. Your transcripts showed the truth. I looked it up myself after. Professor Morrison, not Hartwell. You never took his class. You never even met him. I knew, and I said nothing. Your mother needed to believe Brad. She needed a villain, and you were easier to sacrifice than him. And I chose peace. I chose the path of least resistance. I chose to let them destroy you rather than fight. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that at least one person in that house knew the truth. I'm so sorry, Linda, for everything. Dad." I read it 7 times. I sat on my hallway floor and cried for an hour. I thought about calling him. I thought about writing back. I even started a letter 3 different times. 2 weeks later, another envelope arrived. Same handwriting, heavier this time. "Linda, don't write back. Don't call. Your mother found my first letter before I could mail it. I had to pretend I'd thrown it away. She made me choose, the family or reaching out to you. I chose peace again. I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. Please don't contact me. It will only make things worse. Your father." He knew. He'd always known, and he'd chosen silence, not once, but twice. I kept both letters. I put them in my locked drawer with the transcript and the returned envelopes and the screenshots of Brad's texts, and I never wrote back. The accident happened on a Tuesday night in January, 6 years after the Thanksgiving that ended my family. Brad was driving home from a client dinner at a steakhouse in downtown Hartford. He'd had 3 drinks, maybe 4. His blood alcohol was 0.09% when they tested him, just over the legal limit of 0.08. Not falling down drunk, but impaired enough to slow his reflexes, blur his judgment. Route 44, just outside Hartford. Dark road, freezing rain, visibility near 0. The kind of night where you should drive 10 miles under the limit and pray. A pedestrian ran across the highway. Witnesses said he came out of nowhere, darting between cars in the rain, trying to reach the median for reasons no one would ever know. Brad swerved. His car clipped a guardrail and spun into a telephone pole. The airbag deployed. His head hit something. He was conscious but disoriented, bleeding from a cut above his eye. The pedestrian, a 63-year-old man named Robert Castillo, was hit by another vehicle, a gray sedan, speeding that never stopped. The driver fled into the rain, no plates visible in the darkness, no witnesses close enough to identify the car. Brad, concussed and confused, stumbled out of his wrecked car and walked a quarter mile to a gas station. He sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to remember what had happened. By the time the police arrived at the accident scene, he was gone. They found him an hour later, still sitting there, still staring. He was arrested on the spot, vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Bail denied because Robert Castillo, father of 2, grandfather of 4, had died on the wet pavement before the ambulance arrived. I found out about Brad's arrest the way I found out about everything in my family, by accident. Dennis brought me the intake log as part of our daily case review, just routine. I scanned it the way I always did, checking for patterns, connections, names I recognized. And there it was, Bradley Gerald Whitmore. I stared at the photo for 11 seconds. I felt nothing at first, just cold recognition, then understanding, then something I didn't expect, opportunity. Brad was facing 15 to 25 years. Vehicular manslaughter in Connecticut is a Class B felony when the driver leaves the scene. Add the DUI enhancement, mandatory minimums. He'd be in prison until his daughter was in college. I should have recused myself. I should have handed the file to another ADA and walked away. Instead, I pulled the traffic camera footage request that Brad's defense attorney, an overworked public defender, hadn't filed. What I saw changed everything. The gray sedan that hit Robert Castillo didn't appear out of nowhere. It had been weaving through traffic for half a mile, changing lanes erratically, driving at least 20 miles over the limit. The driver ran the red light at the intersection where Castillo was crossing. Brad's car wasn't anywhere near the pedestrian when the impact happened. He'd already swerved. He was facing the guardrail. His brake lights were on. The gray sedan hit Castillo, fishtailed, and accelerated into the night. Brad didn't kill anyone. He was a witness to a hit and run, not the perpetrator. He'd fled the scene because he was concussed, confused, and terrified. It didn't excuse the DUI. It didn't excuse leaving. But it meant the difference between 25 years in prison and a misdemeanor plea. And his defense attorney hadn't even requested the footage. They came to my office on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced, desperate. I was in a meeting with the county sheriff when my assistant knocked on the door. "There are 2 people in the lobby," she said. "They claim they're your family." I finished the meeting, I reviewed a file, I made 2 phone calls. I made them wait 23 minutes. When I walked into the lobby, my mother looked like she'd aged a decade. Her hair was thinner and grayer than I remembered. Her face was drawn, hollowed out by weeks of sleepless nights. She was clutching her purse with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. My father stood behind her, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. The same posture he'd had at Thanksgiving 6 years ago. The posture of a man who'd chosen silence so many times, it was now the only language he knew. My assistant had called me Mrs. Hamilton. They'd asked for Linda Whitmore. The silence that followed said everything. I didn't hug them. I didn't smile. I kept my voice exactly as professional as I would with any other visitors to the district attorney's office. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, my office is down the hall. You have 5 minutes. Not Mom and Dad, not Gerald and Diane. Formal, distant, the same courtesy I'd extend to strangers, because that's what they were now. They sat in the chairs across from my desk. I remained standing, my back to the window, the afternoon light behind me. Mom spoke first, her voice cracked and desperate. "Linda, please, your brother is in jail. The lawyer says he could go to prison for 20 years. We don't know what to do. We don't have the money for a real attorney. Please, you have to help." I let the silence stretch for 5 full seconds before responding. "Let me be clear about something. I'm aware of the charges against Bradley. I've reviewed the case file and the evidence." "You have?" Hope flickered across her face. "I'm the assistant district attorney for this county. Reviewing cases is what I do." "Then you can help him. You can make this go away. You can—" I held up my hand, the same gesture she'd used on me in her kitchen 6 years ago. That's not how the legal system works, and even if it were, I have a conflict of interest. I can't prosecute or defend a family member. "But you must know someone. You must have connections. Please, Linda, he's your brother." I let those words hang in the air. "He's your brother." "Is he?" I said quietly. "Because 6 years ago, when he lied about me to destroy my career, he didn't act like a brother. When he fabricated evidence and convinced you to disown me based on something he invented, he didn't seem very concerned about family." Mom's face crumpled. We didn't—" Dad finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, worn down to nothing. "Linda, we know we made mistakes." Mistakes. The words sat between us like a bomb. You didn't make mistakes, I said. You made choices. You chose to believe a lie without evidence. You chose to humiliate me in front of 16 relatives. You chose to return my letters unopened. You chose to block my number. You chose to tell everyone that I abandoned you when you were the ones who threw me away. Mom was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Dad was staring at his hands. I continued. And 3 years after you cut me off, someone filed a complaint with the state bar trying to destroy my career, to get me disbarred. The complaint was anonymous, but the investigation traced the IP address. I paused. It came from your house. Silence. Total, devastating silence. That wasn't us, Mom whispered. I know. It was Brad, still trying to destroy me even after he'd already won. We didn't know, Dad said. We didn't know he did that. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I walked to my office door and opened it. I'm going to review the traffic camera footage. If there's evidence that exonerates Bradley of the manslaughter charge, I'll make sure it reaches the right people. You'd do that? Dad asked. After everything? I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm not doing it for Brad. I'm doing it because Robert Castillo's family deserves to know who actually killed him. The truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. That's the difference between revenge and justice. One is personal, the other is principle. I gestured toward the door. The truth doesn't need forgiveness to set you free. They walked out. I closed the door behind them and stood at my window for a long time, watching them cross the parking lot below. 2 small figures, hunched against the cold, walking toward a car I didn't recognize. For the first time in 6 years, I'd seen my parents, and I'd felt nothing at all. The grand jury saw the footage on a Monday. 4 camera angles showing the gray sedan running the red light. Speed analysis showing it was traveling 43 miles per hour in a 25 zone. Enhancement showing Brad's car already at the guardrail, brake lights on, facing away from the impact zone. A reconstruction proving he couldn't have hit Robert Castillo from that position. The grand jury declined to indict on the manslaughter charge. The leaving the scene charge was reduced to a misdemeanor given Brad's documented concussion and evidence of disorientation. He pleaded guilty to the DUI, 90-day suspended license, 2 years probation, mandatory alcohol counseling, community service. He walked out of the courthouse a free man. I wasn't there. I was in court, prosecuting a domestic violence case, doing my actual job. But I heard what happened from Aunt Ruth, who'd driven down from Boston. Brad's wife, Megan, was waiting for him on the courthouse steps, but she wasn't there to celebrate. She'd hired her own lawyer. During the 3 weeks Brad was in jail, she'd had time to think, time to ask questions, time to finally listen to the stories Ruth had been telling her for years. She handed him divorce papers, right there in front of the reporters and the cameras. You lied about your sister, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You destroyed her life because you were jealous, and you let your parents disown her based on something you made up. Brad tried to speak. She cut him off. Emma is going to grow up knowing her aunt, the real aunt, and you're going to have to explain to her, someday, why her father did what he did. She walked away. Brad stood on those courthouse steps, free from prison but losing everything else, and watched his family drive away without him. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my porch, Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching the first snow of December fall on our front yard. Harry is inside making pancakes. Objection is asleep at my feet, snoring softly, chasing rabbits in his dreams. The doorbell rings. I open it to find a little girl, 5 years old, holding a stuffed rabbit and looking up at me with eyes I recognize. My eyes, my grandmother's eyes. Behind her, Megan is standing on the walkway, looking nervous but hopeful. Emma, Megan says, this is your Aunt Winda. The girl considers me for a long moment. Then she holds up the rabbit. This is Mr. Whiskers. He wants to know if you have any cookies. I kneel down until we're eye level. You know what, Mr. Whiskers? I think we might have some chocolate chip cookies inside. Would you like to help me find them? Emma smiles. It's the first real smile I've received from anyone in my family in 6 years. Megan and I talk while Emma explores the house with objection following her from room to room. The divorce is almost final. Brad moved back in with my parents. He has supervised visitation with Emma every other weekend. Your mother calls me sometimes, Megan says. She asks about you, what you're doing, if you're happy. What do you tell her? The truth. that you're thriving, that you have a beautiful life, that you built it yourself without them. I nod. That's accurate. She asked me to give you this. Megan hands me an envelope, my mother's handwriting on the front. I don't open it until after they've gone. Harry sits beside me on the porch while I read. 3 pages. Apologies, explanations, regrets. The word sorry appears 11 times. She admits she was wrong. She admits she knew, somewhere deep down, that Brad's story didn't make sense. She admits she chose to believe him because it was easier than facing the truth about her golden child. She asks if we can start over. I fold the letter carefully and place it in my desk drawer, next to my father's letters, next to the returned envelopes, next to the torn transcript. I don't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some doors, once closed, don't need to be reopened. They just need to stay where they are, reminding you of how far you've walked. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 days or 5 years or 6. The truth has a patient way of showing up exactly when it's needed most. I didn't get revenge on my brother. I didn't need revenge. I became someone who didn't need it. And that turned out to be the most devastating response of all. Not a scheme, not a plan, just a life lived fully on my own terms with people who chose me back. Blood made them relatives, but it never made them family. If you're waiting for your family to see you, really see you, stop waiting. See yourself first. Build the life you deserve with the people who show up. And when the others finally turn around, let them find a door that you control. You decide when it opens, you decide how wide, you decide who walks through. That's not revenge, that's architecture. My name is Linda Hamilton. I'm 32 years old. I'm a prosecutor, a wife, a daughter to people who chose me, and finally, an aunt. And I'm exactly who I was always supposed to be. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have saved him? And if you want more stories like this, check the description for one I think you'll love just as much. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.